The rain had not stopped for 7 days. Cold water rolled down shattered helmets. Mud swallowed broken swords. Smoke drifted through the valley like wandering ghosts. And there, beneath a torn black banner, stood a warrior who had lost again. Another defeat, another retreat, another night with nothing but silence and frost for company. His army was gone, his name mocked by enemies, his victories forgotten because there were none left to remember. Yet something about him terrified people, not because he could conquer kingdoms, but because suffering had failed to conquer him. Most men collapse after repeated failure. Their spirit bends, their identity dissolves, they begin to negotiate with weakness. But this man grew quieter, stronger, more disciplined, as if every loss was sharpening something invisible inside him. The old historians would later write about kings who won empires, generals who marched through cities covered in gold, rulers who carved their names into stone, but they rarely spoke about the rarer kind of man, the one who loses everything and still refuses to betray himself. This is the real battle, not the clash of steel, not the war outside. The war within, because there is a moment in every life when the world stops rewarding you. No applause, no recognition, no victory, only resistance. And in that silence you discover who you truly are. The warrior understood something most people never notice. A man is not destroyed when he loses. He is destroyed when he abandons himself trying to avoid loss. And so while others fought to protect their reputation, he fought to protect his soul. The mountains watched him walk alone through snowstorms. The forests watched him train when nobody believed in him anymore. The temples watched him kneel in silence while his pride burned to ash. He was becoming dangerous, not to the world, to illusion. Because once a person no longer needs victory to remain disciplined, they become impossible to control. And that transformation always begins the same way, with pain. There is an ancient story told in fragments across forgotten civilizations. A young soldier climbed a mountain to seek wisdom from an old monk who had once advised kings. The soldier carried scars across his body, but the deeper wounds were hidden beneath his armor. "I have failed," he said. The monk poured tea into a cracked bowl. "And yet," the old man replied, "you are still here." The soldier clenched his fists. "I lost battles, I lost brothers, I lost honor." The monk remained calm. "No," he said softly, "you lost outcomes. That is different." Silence filled the room. Outside, wind moved through cedar trees. Then the monk asked one question. When defeat arrived, what inside you remained untouched? The soldier could not answer, because he had spent his entire life building himself around victory. And when victory disappeared, he no longer knew who he was. Most people never notice this. They attach their identity to external things: success, attention, status, validation. And when those things vanish, their sense of self vanishes with them. This is why so many people break after failure, not because failure is unbearable, but because they built themselves on unstable ground. The warrior who never lost himself understood a deeper truth. Identity must be forged internally, not borrowed from applause, not borrowed from achievement, not borrowed from the temporary opinions of crowds. Real strength begins when a person says, "Even if the world gives me nothing, I will still remain who I choose to be." That is self-mastery, and almost nobody reaches it, because it requires sacrifice. The sacrifice of ego, the sacrifice of comfort, the sacrifice of illusion. Most people spend their lives avoiding discomfort. The warrior walked directly into it, because he understood something terrifying. Comfort weakens unnoticed, like rust beneath armor. Slowly, quietly, patiently, the enemy within rarely announces itself. It whispers, "Rest today, compromise this once, No one will notice, and that is how character erodes. Not in dramatic moments, in ordinary moments. The ordinary moments are where character is built. A man becomes disciplined when he chooses integrity in silence, when nobody is watching, when there is no reward. Especially then, the first principle the warrior learned was this: endure without bitterness. Winter had arrived early that year. The battlefield was frozen beneath sheets of grey ice. Dead fires smoked beneath snow. Crows circled above abandoned shields. The surviving soldiers cursed fate. Some cursed their leaders, others cursed the gods, but the warrior remained silent. Not because he felt no pain, but because he understood bitterness is a second wound. The first wound is suffering. The second wound is the story we tell ourselves about suffering. Many people spend years feeding resentment, replaying betrayals, rehearsing injustice, slowly becoming prisoners of memory. What he understood was this: pain can deepen a person, but bitterness corrupts them. One creates wisdom, the other creates poison, and modern life is filled with hidden bitterness. People compare themselves endlessly. They envy strangers. They resent the success of others while secretly abandoning their own discipline. They smile outwardly while carrying invisible rage within, but resentment drains life force. It steals clarity. A bitter mind cannot see truth clearly because emotion distorts perception. This is why the warrior trained himself to endure disappointment without surrendering his inner balance. He lost battles, but he refused to become cruel. He was betrayed, but he refused to become dishonest. He suffered, but he refused to worship suffering. That restraint became his power, because anyone can become destructive after pain. Very few remain honorable. And honor is not old-fashioned. It is psychological stability. It is the ability to suffer without becoming corrupted by suffering. That is rare. That is mastery. The second principle emerged during solitude. Years after defeat, the warrior disappeared into the mountains. No armies, no titles, no witnesses, only forests. Rain, stone temples buried beneath fog. At first, the silence tortured him, because silence reveals everything we try to escape. The noise of modern life protects people from themselves. Constant distraction, constant stimulation, constant escape. But when silence arrives, the hidden chaos surfaces: regret, fear, emptiness, unresolved grief. The warrior sat beside candles in abandoned halls and faced all of it. Night after night, he began to understand that solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is confrontation, the confrontation with your own mind. Most people cannot endure it. They need constant entertainment because they are terrified of stillness, terrified of hearing their own thoughts clearly. But the warrior stayed, and eventually the storm inside him began to settle. This is the strange paradox of discipline. At first it feels restrictive. Then it becomes liberation, because a person who controls their own mind no longer depends on external conditions for peace. Rain or sunlight, praise or criticism, victory or defeat. Their center remains steady. This is why ancient philosophers valued solitude, not as escape from life, but as preparation for it. The man who cannot sit alone with himself will eventually become controlled by impulse, and impulse is easy to manipulate. Modern systems profit from distraction. They profit from emotional instability, from outrage, from addiction, from endless craving. But the warrior understood that attention is sacred. Where attention goes, life follows. So he guarded his mind like a fortress, not allowing every opinion to enter, not allowing every temptation to dominate him. This was his hidden discipline, and slowly he became unshakable. The third principle was restraint. One evening, after years in isolation, bandits attacked a village near the mountains. The warrior arrived after the fires had already begun. The villagers begged him to kill the men responsible. and he could have, easily. But instead, he waited, calm, controlled. Most people misunderstand strength. They think strength is aggression, domination, emotional intensity. But true strength is measured by restraint. Anyone can unleash anger. Very few can hold it without being consumed by it. The enemy within often wears the face of emotion, pride, impulse, vanity, wrath, and these enemies destroy more lives than any battlefield ever could. The warrior knew that uncontrolled emotion blinds judgment. A man in rage becomes predictable, manipulable, weak. So he acted only when necessary, spoke only when useful, moved only with purpose. This gave his presence unusual weight, because calm people unsettle chaotic minds. Most people react automatically. Insult them, they explode. Tempt them, they surrender. Praise them, they lose awareness. But the disciplined mind creates distance between feeling and action, and within that distance freedom exists. Modern life encourages constant reaction, immediate outrage, immediate pleasure, immediate opinion. But wisdom moves slower. It observes first. The warrior understood that every unnecessary reaction gives away power, and power is not dominance over others. It is sovereignty over oneself. This is why restraint feels heavy at first, because the ego wants expression, it wants revenge, it wants validation, but restraint sharpens perception. It teaches patience, precision, control. A sword constantly swung becomes dull, a mind constantly reacting becomes weak. And so the warrior mastered stillness, not because he lacked emotion, but because he refused to become its servant. The fourth principle was sacrifice. There is no transformation without loss. People want growth without discomfort, wisdom without suffering, discipline without inconvenience. But nature does not work this way. The forest sheds leaves. The snake sheds skin. The old self must die for the new self to emerge. The warrior understood this. After returning from the mountains, he walked through villages where old friends no longer recognized him. Some mocked his silence. Others called him broken, but he no longer needed their approval. Because sacrifice had changed him. He had sacrificed the need to appear strong, the need to impress others, the need to win every argument. And in losing those things, he gained something greater, inner freedom. Most people are imprisoned by image. They shape their lives around perception, how they appear, how they are judged, how they are ranked. But image is fragile. One failure can destroy it. One criticism can wound it. The warrior stopped living for appearance. He lived according to principle, and principles survive storms. This is why difficult periods are often sacred. They strip away performance. They reveal what is real. The enemy within hates sacrifice because sacrifice threatens ego. It demands patience instead of immediate reward, purpose instead of comfort, depth instead of distraction. But every meaningful transformation requires surrender. A seed must disappear beneath soil before it becomes a tree. And during that buried season, it looks like death. Most people quit there. They mistake transformation for failure, because growth often feels like destruction before it feels like rebirth. The warrior endured that season, quietly, without applause, without certainty, and that changed him forever. The fifth principle was persistence without attachment. Years later, another war arrived. The warrior was older now, slower, scarred by time. Again he fought, again he lost, and still he did not break. This confused people. How can a man continue after so much defeat? Because they misunderstood his purpose. He no longer fought to guarantee victory. He fought because it was aligned with his values. There is enormous freedom in this. Most suffering comes from attachment to outcomes. People believe, I will only be at peace once I succeed. I will only respect myself once I win. I will only feel worthy once others recognize me, and so their emotional state becomes chained to external events. But the warrior had detached identity from outcome. He focused only on what he controlled: effort, conduct, integrity, discipline. This is ancient wisdom. The Stoics understood it. The monks understood it. The philosophers understood it. Peace does not come from controlling the world. It comes from controlling your response to the world. This is the real battle, because modern culture teaches the opposite. It teaches people to chase endless validation, to measure worth externally, to fear failure more than dishonor. But failure is temporary. Self-betrayal lasts longer. The warrior would rather lose honestly than win through corruption. And that is why defeat never truly defeated him, because internally he remained undefeated. There is a kind of person history rarely celebrates: the person who continues with dignity despite invisible pain, the person who wakes early to rebuild quietly, who keeps promises nobody else hears, who refuses to surrender integrity even when life becomes cruel. These people rarely receive applause, but they carry civilizations. The sixth principle was purpose. Near the end of his life, the warrior returned to the mountain temple where he once sought wisdom. The old monk was dying. Candles flickered against stone walls. Snow fell softly outside. The warrior asked one final question: "How do you know if your life mattered?" The old monk smiled faintly. Then he pointed toward the mountains. "Look carefully," he whispered. The warrior stared at the landscape. Nothing moved. No monuments, no armies, no evidence of greatness. Only silence. Then the monk spoke again. "The mountain does not announce its strength. The river does not announce its purpose. Yet both transform the world simply by remaining true to their nature." Silence filled the room once more. And suddenly, the warrior understood. Purpose is not fame. Purpose is alignment. It is living in accordance with truth so deeply that your existence itself becomes meaningful. Many people spend their lives chasing significance through visibility. But visibility is not meaning. Noise is not meaning. Performance is not meaning. A meaningful life is built quietly, choice by choice, habit by habit, moment by moment. The ordinary moments are where character is built. The way you speak when angry, the way you behave when exhausted, the promises you keep when nobody would punish you for breaking them. That is destiny in its smallest form. The warrior realized he had misunderstood victory for most of his life. Victory was never conquering others. Victory was refusing to lose himself. And perhaps that is the highest form of strength, not domination, not perfection, integrity. To remain internally whole while the world pressures you to fracture. To remain disciplined in an age of distraction, calm in an age of outrage, honorable in an age of performance. That is rare. That is revolutionary. Years after the warrior died, travelers still spoke about him, not because he won wars, but because he carried something people could feel but could not explain. Presence, depth, inner stability. He reminded people of something they had forgotten: that human beings are capable of enormous dignity, even in suffering, especially in suffering. And maybe that is why his story survives, because deep down everyone is fighting some invisible battle, a battle against distraction, against fear, against weakness, against emptiness, against the enemy within. Some lose themselves chasing approval. Others lose themselves chasing comfort. Others slowly abandon their values, one compromise at a time. But there are still a few who choose differently, a few who continue walking through storms without hatred, who continue rebuilding without applause, who continue practicing discipline in silence. People like this move differently through life. They are calmer, less reactive, harder to manipulate, not because life became easy, but because they became stronger internally. And strength is not loud. The ocean is deep because it remains still beneath the surface. The mountain is powerful because it does not move for every passing storm. The warrior understood this. That peace is not weakness. Stillness is not passivity. Restraint is not surrender. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is remain faithful to their principles when everything around them encourages compromise. This is the real battle, not against enemies outside, against decay within, against the gradual erosion of discipline, the slow corruption of integrity, the temptation to become lesser in exchange for comfort. Most people never notice this while it is happening. One small compromise, then another, until one day they no longer recognize themselves. The warrior protected something more valuable than reputation. He protected his soul, and in the end, that became his greatest victory. So when life humiliates you, observe yourself carefully. When failure arrives, watch what begins speaking inside your mind. When loneliness appears, listen to what you try to escape, because difficult seasons reveal hidden truths. They expose dependency, illusion, fragility, but they also reveal potential. The potential to become disciplined instead of resentful, wise instead of reactive, grounded instead of desperate. Transformation rarely looks glorious while it is happening. It looks like solitude, repetition, silence, sacrifice. It looks like walking through winter without knowing when spring will come. But this is where real character is forged, not during comfort, in resistance. The warrior who lost every battle understood something the victorious often never learn. External success means little if internal order is lost. A man can conquer nations and still remain enslaved to impulse. Another can lose everything and remain free. So ask yourself, who are you when recognition disappears? Who are you when nobody applauds? Who are you when life becomes difficult? That answer is your true identity, not your image, not your achievements, not your status, your choices, your discipline, your integrity. Because at the end of life, people rarely regret failing. They regret abandoning themselves. They regret becoming smaller to fit fear, softer to fit comfort, dishonest to fit survival. The warrior refused, and because of that, he remained undefeated in the only battle that truly mattered, the battle for his own soul. The rain eventually stopped. The battlefields disappeared beneath grass. The armor rusted into dust. The banners vanished into history. But somewhere, in the silence between mountains and wind, the spirit of that warrior still walks, a reminder that even after losing everything, a human being can still stand with dignity, calm, disciplined, unbroken. And perhaps that is the greatest victory of all.